As many of you know, 2024 would have been Immanuel Kant's 300th birthday if he hadn't died. So we are honoring his 300th with a course on the true project of his entire critical philosophy, with a strong focus on the critique of pure reason, the so-called first critique, and the critique of practical reason, and also the critique of judgment. So I'm going to go over the course for a couple of minutes, and if you have questions on the course or on Kant, just let me know. I'll be here for about 25 minutes maybe. And once I've done the introduction to the course, I'll explain to you why, with Kant, the domination of nature through the natural sciences, scientific models, becomes possible, is enabled by Kant's transcendental logic and transcendental idealism, and why, however, Kant does not absolutize that himself, because for him practical reason has primacy, and why then you can see the consequences that spawn from Kant, especially with Schelling and Hegel, who both in their different ways try to return to nature. Now, you may have, if you know anything about Kant, you may be under the assumption that he wrote an epistemology in the so-called first critique, the critique of pure reason. But that is not the case. Instead, what Kant does, and we'll get to this at great detail at the course, Kant revolutionizes thought. If he had written something as harmless as an epistemology, then we would not very much remember him today. Instead, and I'll keep this as simple as possible for the reasons of this live stream, he revolutionizes thought by his so-called transcendental logic, which looks at the form of thought that subjectively structure objectivity. And in fact, it could be argued, and this is what we'll get to in a bit, that with Kant, what we call quote unquote nature or reality becomes a fiction, or layers upon layers of fiction, or even a necessary transcendental illusion. So that what the sciences, by way of their scientific models and the Procrustes bed of those models, present us with is not at all what we in a vernacular sense would refer to as reality. Think of nuclear physics, quantum physics, etc., but instead a transcendental illusion. And by the way, just to mention this as a side note, reality, strictly speaking, in philosophy always means framework rather than what we really want to get to, which is actuality. And so the price that we pay with Kant is that we no longer have access to things as they are in themselves, no longer to the ousia of themselves. So the physis on what a thing is in its own nature is irrelevant. What's more relevant is the abstract scientific law, for example. So let me point out, if you have any questions, I'll be here about another 20 minutes. I'll get to the questions in the end. Now I'd like to invite you to join the course, which is the best way to engage with Kant over. So we'll be meeting for about, it's 10 weeks in total, but it's 9 seminars. We'll have 1 week off for reading weeks. You can have some time for yourself to read up on everything. You can enroll via the link in the description of this video here, this live stream, but also via this link here in the chat. If you're watching this on Twitter, I'd invite you to come over to my YouTube channel. That's probably better. And let me just show you the enrollment page before we continue. So this is the enrollment page. You find all lecture and seminar dates here. We'll meet for the first time next week, Saturday, the 20th of April, 6 to 8 p.m. UK time. That's 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All seminar dates are listed here as always Saturdays, 1 week off in May, as I mentioned, and then 4 more seminars in June. At the final seminar, you will present your own work on Kant. And Kant really is crucial for anyone who wants to understand any relevant thinker post Kant. Whether you're interested in Hegel or Marx, the phenomenologists, and why phenomenology, Husserl and Heidegger demand a return zu den Sachen selbst, to the things themselves post Kant, you need to understand what happens with Kant first. And let me just point out what the course will be like. I will lecture during the first hour for probably about 45 minutes. And that lecture, of course, is recorded. So you have access to the lecture afterwards. It won't be made available here. So this is not a YouTube course. This is behind a paywall. So you have to enroll. And the lectures are live. We meet over Zoom. After the lecture, I send you off into breakout sessions for about 15 minutes each, so you can discuss what you've been reading and what you just heard in the lecture. We will be very close to the text. I'll be working with the Paul Geyer and Wood translation, and also, of course, with the original German that I have here from Meiner Verlag. The first lecture will address what Kant has, what even the project is as he sees it, as he describes it in the preface and in the introduction, and we'll consider especially why he thinks that metaphysics is a battlefield, why it needs solving, and how transcendental logic can provide that solution, and also then what he means by the Copernican revolution. Now, again, if you come at this with the assumption that most scholars have, that Kant writes in epistemology, the question how we know, or how can we know that the representation that I have in my mind corresponds to the object out there, then you misunderstand Kant right from the beginning. You will not understand any philosophy that comes after Kant that especially responds to Kant. Hegel's science of logic will not ever be transparent to you, if it ever can be. So if you scroll further down on the enrollment page, which I implore you to do, you can either take the self-study tier or asynchronous study, which means that you get access to the video lectures that are recorded and also to handouts. I'll put handouts together for every single meeting. And this is, because people always ask, this is the best way really to enroll in a course, is the best way to support the work here that I'm doing. You could also, of course, join the seminars. So these are 9 group seminars that I lead. You can present your own work at the end. If you want to write an essay, I'm happy to read your essay. I won't mark it, but I will give you helpful comments on how to improve and what to look out for. Or if you'd like to take one-on-one sessions with me, then this is the best option for you. Or you could also just there's a payment plan here for the seminars. You also find a list of the lectures. And yeah, that's it from the enrollment page here for me. As I mentioned before, if you have a question on the course, let me know in the chat here and I'll get back to you. I cannot read anything that's on Twitter. I can only read what you send me on either Facebook or YouTube. Now, there is, with Kant, a certain alienation from nature. So especially those of you who are interested in accelerationism capitalistic reproduction, etc., there is something to be gleaned from Kant. There's something to be learned here, insofar as, again, we must, in a certain sense, be blind to nature herself in order to control nature. So even though Kant does not absolutize the technical, practical access to the natural world, it is very prominent, especially in the first critique. And it's not so much about that we don't know what things are in themselves and that the world just appears to us in a certain way. It's rather the fact that what something is in itself is completely insignificant to Kant. So the what something is, the essence of something, is pushed into the noumenon. That's the very high price that we pay with this knowledge of domination and control that is established with Kant, whether that was his intention or not. And now, why does he do that? Kant wants to uphold the legitimacy and supremacy of formal logic over the appearances. Now, in order for formal logic to hold, there must not be contradiction. We could also put this differently: there must not be resistance or opposition. But when something shows itself by itself, let's say a river, a bird, um, a tree, the river and the bird and the tree, they're not perfectly and immediately simply available to us in the way that we would want them to be available. By the way, if you want to understand the full depth of Heidegger's understanding of technology as and framing, a Gestell in German, it is also crucial to have understood Kant in the proper way. Now, you may have heard this famous quote by Kant: thoughts without intuitions are empty, intuitions without concepts are blind. Now, the ordinary understanding, interpretation of this is that Kant here argues for sensuality, for sense perception that has to go together with the understanding or with the reason. So there's a certain hubris of reason or even the understanding, and Kant binds again sense perception to reason. Now, that is not entirely true. Instead, there's something else that goes on here. What is really going on here is that the categories predetermine how the manifold appears to us in a regular manner, so that the nothing, to put it simply, nothing ever shows itself as it is in itself. In a sense, we are to be blind to nature and to what it might be in itself, which tells you very deeply what technics is in its core. It does not want to disclose nature, reality, etc., but instead use a framework and reaffirm that very framework by corroborating objectively what it has determined subjectively. This, by the way, allows for scientific experiments, and scientific experiments in such a way that they can be repeated, and repeatedly so. Despite the current replication crisis, in principle, this is what this allows for. So I would like to stress again that you can see this already when you look at the transcendental aesthetic, especially when it comes to time. It's how Kant here already begins to solve for the problem of contradiction by pointing out that in a sequence, a linear sequence, we can um, avoid contradiction precisely thanks to linear time. So you will see once, in a sense, what we'll do at the course is we won't be plowing through every single page, but instead we'll be reading the most significant sections in such a way that we can gather and understand, so that you, from the beginning, you're not caught up in the cobweb of the, the misunderstanding that Kant is writing in epistemology, that really what we're after is how we form cognition and how we can make sure that there is what we have represented in our mind is correspondingly, it corresponds, sorry, to an object out there, etc. It's quite something else that goes on, and the the uh, the technical practical world access that comes to the fore here is only reeled in or held at bay because Kant places primacy, uh, over on practical reason. So he would not say that uh, just you ought to because you can, which is the technical, practical maxim, but instead you can because you ought to is the moral imperative. So this is not absolutized in Kant, but once you get to someone like Fichte, you can see that nature really disappears fully and becomes a mere fiction. In Kant, there's even, once we'll get to, because we'll be reading the third critique as well, where we focus on genius, the sublime, and nature, where Kant does provide us with a way out, as it were. But the first critique does not on its own. Um, yeah, so if there are any questions specifically on Kant that don't go into all kinds of other directions, then I'd be happy to respond to them. Also, very important to understand, Kant does not write an ontology. It's often claimed for some reason. Instead, it is a revolution of the form of thought. And this is what we will be looking at the course. So if there are questions specifically on Kant, let me know now and I'll try and answer them. It should also be on his understanding of nature. In the meantime, let me go back to the enrollment page. And by the way, so I see a question here. Heidegger does not have a universalist position. I don't know why you would say that. That's not the case. Quite completely, totally the opposite. Okay, so the starry heavens above me, it can't, well, the main focus is really Kant's insight into transcendental freedom. So we'll be considering his attempt to, well, because he sees what is at stake, what we can already see when we read Plato and Aristotle closely, that let's say the self-positing of freedom is already present, as it were, in Plato and Aristotle, but really comes fully to the fore with Kant, Fichte, and Hegel. So once you are enrolled, what you will have access to already now is a 1-hour lecture on Kant, which already leads you into the text in such a way that perhaps it becomes clearer what we're on about. We're meeting for the first time in exactly 6 days. So you have enough time if you enroll now to start reading. So there's a selection of readings that with every single time, whenever you when you enroll, you see listed where what to read for this week. I'll send you. You'll be sent a Zoom link just an hour before the meeting, and once you come in, we have a discussion after the lecture. So let me just point out again to those who just join us now. The first meeting is April 20th, and that is next Saturday. Second meeting is on April 27th, always Saturdays from 6 to 8 p.m. UK time, 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. In May, there will be 1 week where we're off. I think it's the 18th of May, just to give you, after 4 lectures and seminars, some time to read and discuss, etc. Maybe you can meet up on your own. I won't be available that day, but that gives you some time in between to read up on everything. We'll be spending 6 lectures and 6 seminars on the first critique and 1 on the second critique and 1 on the third critique. But as this is now a course with live lectures, I'm very open to suggestions. So we need to get through the first 4, I think, because those will be covering first the introduction, then the transcendental aesthetic, the phenomena noumena distinction, and the transcendental dialectic. After that, I'm quite open to where we could go further in the first critique or even the second critique afterwards. There's a few things we need to discuss, but as I'm lecturing live, there's more of I can actually accommodate some of the things that you suggest better. Then we continue in June for 4 meetings. And the final one on the 22nd, you'll be able to present your own work. So let me continue down here. If you don't have time, let's say if you have time for about 5 seminars, then this is ideal for you. We'll record the seminars and these will be exclusive to the group. So if you are in the seminar tier, you'll have access to the seminar recordings. If you don't have time for the seminars, then the self-study tier is really the best for you. If you'd like to have private tutorials with me, private sessions in addition, then this one is for you. We'll be meeting 5 times, and if you want, here's a payment plan also. Here, I'm listing all lectures here as well, so you get an idea what we will be discussing. If you've never read Kant, then you should maybe have a look over some of his writing to see whether Kant is for you. But as I said, if you have an interest in phenomenology, of course, the neo-Kantians, or Hegel, Marx, Deleuze, even, then maybe, and especially, I think, Heidegger and Hegel, and Schelling, of course, also, you must really have read Kant and his critiques, and you must have done so in a way that provides you with a grounded understanding of the revolution of thought that here occurs, which is unfortunately not taught in this way at most departments the world over, because of I don't know why, the assumption that Kant wrote an epistemology, which denies you access to the text and to the true scope of Kant's project overall. It is an anecdote I think I've told before, many years ago now, at a seminar on logic held by Max Gottschlich. He uh, he mentioned to us, he said, if you came here this morning, if you took the bus or you took maybe an airplane to come to Vienna, and you didn't break out in fear and trembling doing so, then you are a firm believer in transcendental idealism. Why? Because it is through the technical, practical world access that transcendental idealism allows for, and transcendental logic especially, that we can predetermine how the kerosene or the diesel, etc., will react in the engine. So with Kant, we really see the technical, practical world access that presents us with ultimately illusions of what nature is, and places nature in Procrustes beds of scientific models. This is what we can see with Kant, and this is what happens with Kant. So I'd like to invite you again to join the course, and I hope to see you all next week. As there are no questions specifically on this, I shall now leave you, but you can now enroll via this link here in the chat, or if you're seeing this later, then it should also be in the description of this video. If you know anyone who's interested in Kant, German idealism more broadly, the German romantics, maybe the rest of the 19th century as well, and phenomenology, and you think that maybe they might benefit from reading some Kant, then please share this video with them and let them know about the course. Well, that's it. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you next week. Good night.